Here's the 19 basic tips and tricks that can help you play better snooker, with advice on your technique, lining up shots and more, which hopefully should help you avoid any of these. This is Break from Life. Welcome back, and if it's your first time watching one of our videos, then it's fantastic to have you here. Our first tip involves finding the line of the shot. The line of the shot is the continuation of an imaginary line that runs backwards from the object ball to the cue ball. As it comes back across the floor, it forms a guide of where you need to stand and position your cue. Just being able to imagine this line will help you massively with several areas of your technique. Tip 2 is aiming before you actually get to the table, and surprisingly this is something the majority of people playing snooker don't actually do. The most simplistic way to explain aiming is to imagine that the white isn't actually there and that you're actually hitting the object ball directly with your cue. Though if you are going to do this, you do have to remember you're going to be striking the object ball with a tip that's the size of a cue ball. Tip 3, you remember that line of the shot from earlier? Well, we're going to be using it to help us get in the right position. It's no good walking in from any angle. You're going to need to take at least 2 steps in on this line to make sure we've got everything, including your body and your cue, in exactly the right position to play the shot. Tip 4 is to make sure your head is above the line all the way into the shot. This means your perspective of the potting angle never changes, and you never have to second guess yourself about whether or not you're lining up the shot right or wrong. It's a good time to point out at this stage that the line of the shot goes back from where you're aiming on the object ball and through the cue ball, and not between the pocket and the object ball. This is important because it can really help if you're just thinking about things in this way. Tip 5 is about being able to look at the game from your opponent's point of view. From the outside sometimes it looks like your opponent is almost unbeatable. Even when they're not in perfect position, they just keep potting the balls. But that may not be how it feels from your opponent's point of view. They may be seriously concerned that they keep running out of position and are forced to play difficult pots. That's why it's vital to look for weaknesses in your opponent's game, because otherwise you won't be able to focus on your own game when you get to the table, even if the balls are in a really simple position. Eamon Scott is watching us from Belfast in Northern Ireland. Tip 6 is about the importance of standing accurately. Most snooker players will gently rest their cues against their bodies here, and the position your body is in is 100% determined by where you stand, or more precisely where you place this foot, which usually is on or around the line of the shot, which will differ slightly from player to player depending on the exact size and shape of your body. All you need to do is find the exact place to stand that allows you to keep your cue on this line, which is exactly where it has to be if you want a chance of cueing the ball straight. Tip 7. When you're playing against some players, it feels like their safety is so good that you're never going to get a chance. It doesn't matter what you do, you never seem to be left a pot of any kind. And that's why when it comes to safety, every fraction counts. Just by increasing the difficulty of your opponent's shot by a fraction can drastically increase the amount of chances you get, and this is often by playing the most boring shot possible. When someone starts playing snooker, they tend to notice fairly early on how awkwardly the black spot seems to be placed. And that goes both for position and just simply potting the ball, especially when you compare it to how simple potting the blue or potting the pink off their spots feel in comparison. So why do the majority of snooker players actively choose to break build around the black spot? Well, it's because they do so much practice around this position that the slightly more complex shots seem a lot more straightforward. And that's why if you have a small amount of practice time, I highly recommend spending most of it playing shots around the black spot, because it's probably the most vital part of the game to learn. Tip 9. Sometimes games won't go your way, and this simply isn't your fault. This is an example of a shot that I simply have no control over. In fact, every time a red hits a cushion, it has about a 2 to 3% chance of going in a pocket. And here's the complete opposite of that, a shot I have full control over. Now this is where it gets interesting. This is a shot that I have some control over if I pot the ball, but if I miss it, it doesn't necessarily mean it's gone wrong. Just that I've left the result of the shot up to chance, and there are ways of increasing the likelihood of a desirable result, like hitting the balls harder here. Just remember that no matter how good you get at the game, you're never going to be in full control of everything, not even your own technique. Nobody's perfect. Not even Maxime from Clermont-Ferrand in France. Tip 10 is very basic, but it's worth talking about, and it's chalking your cue the right amount. You hardly ever see anyone miss cue because of a lack of chalk. This is mostly just about people over chalking and getting chalk dust everywhere, which isn't a massive problem but can cause the odd kick and bounce every now and again. Tip 11 is developing a pre-shot routine that you can easily repeat. If you can continuously use the same routine, then over time this is just going to help you feel a lot more confident in any position or situation you find yourself in. What you need to do is work out the right amount of feathers and pauses that help you time the ball the best, and then just make sure this is a routine that you can repeat. Tip 12, there's not necessarily a right way to hold the cue, and it can be affected by how high or low you're striking the cue ball. The best thing you can do is wait till you're playing well and work out how your hand moves on the cue. If you learn exactly what your hand does, then you're going to be able to repeat this on the next shot, and a consistent grip is going to make the game seem a lot more straightforward to play. Tip 13 is staying in exactly the same position once you get to the table and not moving on the shot. Surprisingly, this is unlikely to have any negative effects on the shot you're currently playing, but what it will mean the next time you come to the table is you'll be unlikely to know if you're in the right position or not then. That's why if you're ever lining a shot up wrong, you need to get up off the shot and start it again. Because if you're continually moving around on the shot, then there's no way of telling how you actually played it. And if there's no way of even subconsciously assessing what works and what doesn't, then it's highly unlikely that you're ever going to get any better at snooker. And a lot of the time this is the main reason players get to a certain ability and simply stop improving anymore. Tip 14. The most common thing a player will move around on the shot is their bridge hand, and they won't even notice they're doing it. For example, did you see me move my hand there? Normally this is just a player subconsciously moving their thumb to get the cue in exactly the right place. Again, if you're serious about improving at the game, this is another thing you're going to have to make sure you keep completely still. Tip 15. You need to know exactly where the cue ball needs to be before you go to play a shot. But it also really helps if you can monitor the shot and work out if the cue ball has gone exactly where you wanted it to. And this is especially difficult to do on any shot that you miss. Because even if you just watch what happens, this is going to help you subconsciously improve at the game. But we're fully consciously adding Jamie Dodger from Northampton right here in the UK. As I explained earlier, sometimes in this game you have to rely too much on chance, and sometimes that chance goes against you, and there's really nothing you can do about that. This leads players to feel depressed and not in the right frame of mind, and there's not a lot you can do about that either. The problem is I see a lot of good players wasting subsequent chances because they're in a bit of a mood. And sometimes these chances can be incredibly straightforward, so the important thing to do is worry about potting the balls and work out how you feel about it later. Don't waste any energy on controlling your emotions, because there's no way of changing the way you feel about something. Tip 17. When I see players playing in games, I notice a lot of them are concerned about how their cue action is working, and when you're in a game there's nothing you can do about it, and ultimately this has a detrimental effect on your game, because what you really need to be focusing on is how you line up the shot and how you go about staying in position, because getting the cue ball to here takes an awful lot of mental energy, and you can't afford to lose focus on that because you're thinking about what your cue arm is doing. Tip 18. The majority of players playing snooker will be unable to play a shot without any side spin. They can try as hard as they want to, but ultimately they won't be able to find exactly where the middle of the cue ball is, or they won't be able to cue through the ball straight enough to avoid imparting a trace of side on the shot. Now this does seem like the first part of anyone's technique that you want to fix, but it's very difficult to get exactly right. And there are very good players out there who have had 100 breaks playing shots with unwanted side. It makes the game a lot harder to play, but you can deal with this problem by working out in advance how hard you're going to play the shot, because any unwanted side spin can be controlled if you play the shot at a predictable pace. And tip 19 is a bit of a cop-out, because it's to make the commitment to becoming a better player by subscribing to the channel. We make in-depth videos on all the tips we've shown, including videos on this snooker side spin trick, and find out exactly how Stephen Hendry changed the game forever. And remember, don't just watch, play, and don't forget to visit the website. See you later.